Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1991. In less than 2 years, 4 siblings from the same family vanished one after another. 25-year-old Tamarian, 26-year-old Paula, 20-year-old Donald, and 21-year-old Londa. No bodies. No arrests. No explanation. An entire branch of the Phillips family was wiped away as if they never existed. How does nearly an entire generation disappear from one household, without leaving behind a single trace? 2 weeks after Paula vanished into the night, her own brother, Donald, called Tulsa police to report her missing. But when detectives came to speak with him, he was gone too. Investigators quietly wondered if something deeper was at play. Possible connections to local drug activity, suspicious acquaintances, or a tragedy buried beneath the surface. Yet despite whispers and wild theories, one fact remains. There's no solid evidence tying any known suspect to these disappearances. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this story is considered one of Oklahoma's most chilling, how Tulsa detectives still revisit these files decades later, and why, after all this time, the Phillips siblings' fate continues to haunt their family and the community. Tulsa, Oklahoma. The early 1990s. A city caught between oil wealth and poverty, where entire neighborhoods could change from safe to dangerous in just a few blocks. It was here, in a small family circle, that 4 siblings would vanish, one after another, leaving a silence that still lingers today. The first was Tamarian Denise Mamadou, known to family and friends as Cookie. She was 25 years old. Cookie had always been described as the anchor of the Phillips family, the one her younger siblings turned to when life grew hard. She had a soft laugh, a protective instinct, and a stubborn streak that meant if she loved you, she'd fight for you. Cookie was last seen in early 1991, and then she was gone. No witnesses. No clear reason. Just gone. Her absence set a tone of unease, but no one knew it was only the beginning. Not long after, another sister vanished. Paula Phillips. She was 26 years old, but by all accounts, appeared older than her years. Neighbors describe her as thin, frail, almost sickly-looking, but also determined, a woman who had lived a hard life but still pressed forward. On the night of October 3, 1991, Paula told her family she was heading to the store. It was around 7 p.m. in Tulsa, a time when the streets were still alive with traffic and corner stores glowed under buzzing fluorescent lights. She never came home. Her younger brother, Donald Ray Phillips, noticed something was wrong almost immediately. At just 20 years old, Donald had always been protective of his sisters. He was lean, standing at 5 feet 9 inches, with a kind of restless energy that made him stand out in a crowd. When Paula didn't return, Donald was the one who went to the police. On October 7th, he reported her missing. But then something happened that stunned even investigators. 3 days later, before police could sit him down for a full interview, Donald disappeared too. The very brother who had raised the alarm about Paula was now missing himself. 2 sisters, 1 brother, all gone within months. A year later, it happened again. Londa Renee Phillips, just 21 years old, was supposed to meet her relatives after visiting her boyfriend. She never arrived. Her boyfriend reported her missing on November 22, 1992. Like the others, she left behind no trace. No phone call. No explanation. Only an open door where her life once stood. 4 siblings. 4 disappearances. Each case tangled into the next, until the Phillips name became a whispered story in Tulsa, a family erased one by one. And what made it worse was the questions. Had they been targeted? Did the same fate claim all 4? Or did each disappearance come from separate circumstances, connected only by blood? Police have never been able to give a definitive answer. But pause for a moment, and picture this. You grow up in a home with your brothers and sisters, the people who know your secrets, who share your childhood. And then, within just 2 years, one by one, they're all gone. If it were your family, would you start to fear you were next? Or would you cling to hope that they were out there, somewhere, waiting to return? Tulsa, early 1990s. A city caught between yesterday and tomorrow, renewal fanning hopes even as economic hardship and crime cast longer shadows. The Phillips family lived here, close-knit, on a busy residential street. Simple lives. Jobs. Routine school pickups. Family meals. Community. But that sense of normal began unraveling when the first sister disappeared. Tamarian Cookie Mamadou vanished in January 1991. The family hadn't yet connected what had happened to her to what was about to follow. Cookie had always been the calm in the storm, the one people leaned on. After she disappeared, grief was heavy, but something inside Tulsa whispered, this was just the beginning. Months passed. The community held its breath. Then, one evening in October, Paula Phillips walked out to buy groceries under humming streetlights. It wasn't late or unsafe, and yet, she was never seen again. Neighbors remembered the dull buzz of neon signs, a woman's silhouette merging into darkness. Then, nothing. A week later, Donald Phillips, Paula's protective 20-year-old brother, went to police and filed a missing persons report. He spoke with detectives who promised follow-up. But then, in a twist that stopped every heart, Donald disappeared before they could speak to him again. The very person who raised the alarm vanished too. The effect on the neighborhood was chilling. Gas stations closed earlier. Parents whispered at porches. What had been an isolated tragedy became a community nightmare, for siblings linked by blood and by disappearance, all gone, one by one. Investigators would later say that once Donald vanished, the case prevented them from pulling any strings to unravel what happened. Without his testimony, they lost their strongest lead. Now ask yourself at the edge of your seat, if the brother who pleaded for help vanishes, where does that place the family, and the people sworn to protect them? The stories are still there. Fragile pieces of Tulsa's fractured heart. And what happened to the Phillips children of Tulsa? By the end of this video, we're going to trace the path, step by step, with what little remains, and explore the many questions still left unsolved. Most true crime stories pivot on the moment of discovery, an abandoned car, a crime scene, a body. But for the Phillips family, there was no such moment. No crime tape. No flashing barricades. No investigators dusting for fingerprints in a kitchen or a front yard. The only thing discovered was absence. After Tamarian, known lovingly as Cookie, failed to return, her family started with the basics. Phone calls to friends. Drives through familiar neighborhoods. Waiting by the door for a knock that never came. And then Paula disappeared. Suddenly, the Phillips home was wallpapered with flyers, stapled to telephone poles, taped to gas station windows, fluttering in the Oklahoma wind. Each sheet carried the same desperate plea. Have you seen her? When Donald vanished days later, police officers themselves struggled to describe the scope of what was happening. How do you investigate a disappearance when the witness, your one thread to the truth, is gone too? Detectives opened case files, but what stared back were blank pages. No bodies. No suspects. No crime scenes. Just unanswered phone calls, unanswered prayers, unanswered questions. The streets of Tulsa filled with a strange silence. Porch lights flickered on earlier. Families gathered in living rooms, pacing, whispering. Rumors spread about drugs, about enemies, about people best not mentioned aloud. But no rumor could explain the impossible math. 4 siblings gone in less than 2 years. And investigators ask the question that still haunts the case. At what point do you stop calling it coincidence and start calling it a pattern? By late 1991, Tulsa detectives were staring at a case unlike anything they had seen before. 1 disappearance was tragic. 2 was suspicious. But 3, within a matter of months, was impossible to ignore. The timeline was chilling in its simplicity. January 1991. Tamarian Cookie Mamadou disappears. October 3rd. Paula Phillips leaves home to buy something at the store. She never makes it back. Just days later, her younger brother Donald reports her missing. But when police attempt to bring him in for questioning, Donald himself vanishes into the same silence that had swallowed his sisters. And then, in November 1992, the 4th sibling, Londa, is reported missing by her boyfriend after she fails to show up at a relative's home. 4 siblings, gone. 1 family line, erased. Investigators turned their focus to possible drug connections. Tulsa in the early 1990s was wrestling with a surge of narcotics activity, crack cocaine, street-level distribution, and the violent networks that came with it. Detectives quietly admitted that some of the Phillips siblings may have been close to that world, or connected to people who were. As one officer told the Tulsa World in 2009, "There are persons of interest in the cases, but we need more evidence." Yet evidence never came. No car left behind, no trace of a struggle, no fingerprints, no bodies. Without crime scenes, investigators had little to test, little to build upon. Detectives followed leads across neighborhoods, down highways, into rumored houses, but each path ended in the same place, nowhere. Meanwhile, the family kept pleading for answers. Relatives called local reporters, asking why the disappearances weren't making the evening news. But media coverage was limited, barely scratching the surface. For reasons no one could fully explain, the Phillips case never captured the headlines the way other missing person stories did. And so, by the end of 1992, what police had was a case that seemed to evaporate in their hands. 4 siblings gone. Rumors of drugs. Persons of interest, but no charges. A family begging for answers, but left to grieve in silence. Every report, every search, every tip led nowhere. The Phillips case had become a maze with no exit. By 1993, investigators were certain of one thing. The Phillips siblings had not simply walked away from their lives. Something darker had happened. And every path detectives traced led back to the same place, the underbelly of Tulsa's drug scene. In the early 1990s, Tulsa was in the grip of a crack cocaine epidemic. Turf wars, quiet alliances, and sudden disappearances were not uncommon. Some members of the Phillips family, police believed, had ties, however loose, to people operating in that world. Detectives suspected that Paula, Tamarian, Donald, and Londa might have crossed paths with individuals capable of making people vanish without a trace. Local newspapers later reported that there were, in fact, persons of interest. Individuals whose names were known to police, who may have been connected to narcotics activity, and who may have had information about what happened. But suspicion alone wasn't enough. Without bodies, without forensic evidence, and without living witnesses willing to testify, there was nothing to present in court. And here is where the contradictions become chilling. Paula leaves home one night and never returns. Days later, her younger brother Donald does what any protective sibling would do. He calls police, desperate to find her. But when detectives arrive to interview him, Donald is gone. Vanished. The very act of seeking help may have marked him for silence. Was this coincidence? For siblings gone from one family in less than 2 years? Or was there a silencing at work, someone ensuring that no one left behind could tell the truth? Detectives weighed the possibilities. Was Paula's disappearance linked to her own life choices, or to someone she crossed? Did Donald know too much, and pay the price for reporting it? Was Londa targeted because she might have known what happened to her siblings? The unanswered questions piled up. And every time police pressed the persons of interest, the same wall of silence rose before them. Officers later admitted their frustration. They believed they were circling close to answers, but the evidence never materialized. One haunting detail remains at the center of it all. Donald Phillips, the young brother who first raised the alarm, is the link that binds this mystery together. If one person had knowledge of Paula's disappearance, was Donald silenced because he tried to bring it to light? And if so, how many others had to vanish to keep that secret buried? By late 1992, the Tulsa Police Department had reached a breaking point with the Phillips case. What began as one missing woman had spiraled into an almost unthinkable mystery. For siblings, vanishing one after another. And yet, not a single crime scene. Not a single piece of forensic evidence. Not a single body recovered. Detectives began to speak publicly in ways that revealed their suspicions. They hinted that the disappearances were not random, but connected, tied to one another, and potentially to the drug activity that gripped Tulsa's streets at the time. The implication was clear. These siblings either knew something they should not have known, or had become entangled in a network from which there was no safe escape. And that is where the story turns. Because if all four siblings were targeted, this was no accident of circumstance. This looked like retaliation, silencing. Some even whispered about cover-ups. Did someone powerful want this case buried? Or were these simply four tragic cases of individuals who each faced their own deadly fate? The community, and even some investigators, wrestled with the same chilling possibilities. Was it the work of one perpetrator, a figure who knew the family and methodically erased them, one by one? Or were multiple people involved, part of a wider pattern of crime and intimidation? With every year that passed, speculation grew. Family members began to believe that a secret, perhaps one their loved ones carried, had been buried with them. One relative was quoted as saying, "They all vanished because they knew something. I just don't know what it was." The tragedy is that the very silence around the Phillips family only deepened the mystery. Rumors swirled, leads dried up, and the files grew colder. The further detectives pressed, the more resistance they faced. No cooperation. No witnesses. No breakthroughs. And so the story hangs suspended, between theories and silence, between what investigators suspected and what they could never prove. Do you believe these siblings knew something that got them killed, or were they each victims of separate tragedies? That is the question that haunts Tulsa to this day. The disappearances of Tamarian Mamadou, Paula Phillips, Donald Phillips, and Londa Phillips left a wound in Tulsa that has never healed. For siblings, gone within less than 2 years, with no trace to follow. For their family, the pain was unbearable. Parents grew old clinging to fading hope, waiting for news that never came. Year after year, holidays passed with empty chairs at the table. Birthdays went uncelebrated. The family photo albums froze in time, 4 faces missing, for stories unfinished. Detectives, too, felt the weight. Though the Tulsa Police Department kept the files open, and each sibling is still listed today in national databases like NAMUS, the trail has gone cold. There have been no arrests, no recovered remains, and no new leads strong enough to move the investigation forward. The decades have not softened the questions. Instead, they've hardened into haunting silences. How does one family lose 4 children in such a short span of time, and never find answers? For some in Tulsa, the Phillips mystery has faded into the background of the city's long history of crime. But for those who remember, it is not just another case file. It is the story of an entire family line erased. After decades of searching, investigators and the community have been left with only theories. None proven. None complete. The strongest police theory is that the Phillips siblings were swept into Tulsa's early 90s drug world. At that time, violence tied to the crack epidemic was escalating. Retaliation killings and forced disappearances weren't uncommon. Could the siblings have known something, or someone, that put them all in danger? Police hinted this connection privately, and local newspapers reported the drug angle. But without bodies, without forensic evidence, it remains speculation. Others have suggested something darker. What if this wasn't about drugs at all? Some locals whisper about the possibility of a serial predator who methodically targeted the family. The argument is chilling, for disappearances clustered in one family in just 2 years. Too precise to be chance. Too clean to leave evidence. If it was a single killer, how did they manage to silence 4 siblings without leaving a trace? And then, there is the possibility no one wants to face, that each disappearance was unrelated. That in a city already under strain, with crime, addiction, and poverty running rampant, fate struck the Phillips family again and again. But can coincidence really explain 4 siblings, vanishing one by one, in such a short span of time? Each theory carries weight, and each leaves behind even heavier doubts. The drug connection explains motive, but not the silence. The serial predator theory explains precision, but not the lack of patterns elsewhere. The idea of coincidence offers simplicity, but feels impossible to accept. In the end, the Phillips case rests not on evidence, but on questions. And every theory, no matter how convincing, collapses under the same reality. The truth has never been found. 4 siblings gone. Not a single body recovered. Not a single conviction. Just names fading into old case files. How does a family simply vanish? Not once. Not twice. But 4 times. Each disappearance silent, each one leaving another empty chair at the table, another photo frame without an ending. The most unsettling part of the Phillips mystery isn't just the unanswered questions. It's the silence that follows them. No confessions. No leads that stuck. Just the weight of time, pressing down on parents who never saw their children again, on relatives who learned to grieve without graves. In the city of Tulsa, the Phillips siblings are more than just a cold case number. They are a reminder that entire branches of a family tree can be cut away, leaving nothing but shadows where lives once were. And tonight, more than 30 years later, the question still lingers like a ghost over this story. How does an entire family line disappear without a trace? 4 siblings from the same family vanished in less than 2 years. No bodies. No justice. No answers. Do you believe the Phillips siblings stumbled onto something dangerous, or were they victims of a larger network that investigators never managed to unravel? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments. Every perspective adds to the search for answers, even decades later. And if you want to join us as we explore more haunting mysteries that remain unsolved, stay with us here. Subscribe, so you do not miss the stories that still echo in the silence.